Love lost in translation. On a rainy afternoon in late September, the city of Paris hummed softly under a veil of silver mist. The Seine glistened, reflecting the blurred outlines of centuries-old bridges, and the distant tolling of church bells mingled with the quiet shuffle of footsteps along cobblestone streets. It was in this city, at once familiar and foreign, that Emily Bennett found herself pressed against the glass window of a small cafe, her heart pounding with a mixture of anticipation and uncertainty. Emily had always dreamed of Paris. The elegant boulevards, the scent of warm croissants, the promise of romance hidden in every corner. Yet, nothing had prepared her for the reality of living there, its complexities, its loneliness, and the exhilarating possibility of the unexpected. She was an American, a New Yorker used to skyscrapers and the constant thrum of ambition, but here, everything seemed softer, slower, somehow more delicate. She was 28, an aspiring writer, and she had come to Paris on a whim, chasing inspiration after a heartbreak left her adrift. The idea was to lose herself in art and poetry, to find meaning in the unfamiliar, but what she discovered was something far more tumultuous, a story not of her own making, but one she would live. It began with an accident. On her third day in the city, as she hurried along Rue de Rivoli, umbrella in hand, Emily collided with a stranger. Books tumbled from his arms, scattering across the wet pavement. She apologized in halting French, cheeks burning, and stooped to help gather his things. He laughed, a low, musical sound, and replied in English, his accent unmistakably French yet tinged with something else, a warmth that immediately set her at ease. His name was Julien Moreau. He was a translator, a lover of languages, and he lived in a small apartment above a bakery on the left bank. They exchanged pleasantries, then stories, and before Emily knew it, they were sitting in a corner booth of a nearby cafe, sipping strong coffee as rain tapped out a gentle rhythm on the window. Julien was unlike anyone Emily had ever met. He spoke of words as if they were living things, each with its own soul. He told her about the challenge of translating poetry, of how certain emotions could never be perfectly rendered from one language to another. Some feelings, he said, are lost in translation, but sometimes, something beautiful is found in what cannot be said. Emily was captivated. She found herself drawn to him, to the way he listened, the way he looked at her as if she were the only person in the world. Days turned into weeks. They wandered through museums, traded secrets in quiet parks, and argued over the best pastry in the city. Julien introduced her to his favorite bookshop owner, and Emily, in turn, taught him to love American jazz. But as their connection deepened, so did the barriers between them. There were moments, late at night, when Emily would try to express something, a childhood memory, a fear, a hope, and the words would falter. Julien would search for meaning in her eyes, trying to bridge the gap with a gentle touch or a whispered phrase in French. Sometimes they would laugh at their misunderstandings. Other times, silence would settle between them, heavy with all that remained unsaid. One evening, as autumn painted the city in gold and crimson, Julien invited Emily to a rooftop overlooking the glittering skyline. They sat side by side, legs dangling over the edge, and watched as the Eiffel Tower sparkled against the twilight. Julien reached for her hand, his thumb tracing lazy circles against her skin. "Emily," he began, his voice barely above a whisper, "in French, there is a word, manque. It means to miss, but it is more than that. It is to feel the absence of something, to long for it, to ache for it. I never understood this word until I met you." Emily's heart twisted. She had never been good with vulnerability, never learned the art of exposing her heart without fear. She turned to him, searching his face for reassurance. "I'm afraid," she confessed. "I'm afraid that this, us, it's just temporary. That one day, I'll have to go back, and this will become nothing but a memory." Julien smiled, a sadness flickering in his eyes. "Love is always a little bit lost in translation, Emily. But sometimes, it is found in the effort, in the trying." That night, wrapped in each other's arms as Paris slept below, Emily allowed herself to believe in the possibility of forever. But forever, she soon discovered, was as fragile as the first light of dawn. Winter arrived with a vengeance. The city grew colder, the days shorter, and the world seemed to shrink around them. Julian became distant, retreating into work, his laughter growing rare. Emily sensed something shifting, a subtle unraveling she could not name. Arguments flared over trivial things: her homesickness, his reluctance to travel, the language barrier that seemed to widen with every passing day. One evening, after a particularly bitter quarrel, Emily stormed out into the frigid night. She wandered the streets, her breath curling in the air, memories replaying in her mind like fragments of a novel she could not finish. She found herself at the banks of the Seine, staring at the black water, feeling more alone than she had ever felt. It was then that she realized the truth. Love, in all its beauty, was not always enough to conquer distance and difference. There were things that could not be translated, wounds that could not be healed by words alone. She thought of Julian's gentle voice, his insistence that something could always be found in the effort, and she wept, not for him, but for herself, for the hope she had carried across an ocean. The next morning, Emily returned to the apartment. She found Julian in the kitchen, making coffee, his eyes red-rimmed and tired. "I'm sorry," she whispered, her voice trembling. He shook his head. "No, Emily, I am sorry. I thought I could be enough for you, that our love could survive anything. But I see now, it is not so simple." They sat in silence, the weight of their words settling between them. Eventually, Julian reached for her hand, his fingers entwining with hers in a gesture of comfort and farewell. "Sometimes," he said softly, "the most beautiful stories are the ones that cannot be told in words. They are felt, lived, and remembered." Emily nodded, tears slipping down her cheeks. She knew, in that moment, that their story was ending, not with anger or regret, but with gratitude for what had been. She packed her things, folded memories into her suitcase, and left the apartment with one last lingering look. Julian stood in the doorway, watching her go, his silhouette framed by the pale morning light. On the plane back to New York, Emily stared out the window at the receding city, her heart heavy but strangely at peace. She thought of the laughter, the late-night conversations, the way Paris had come alive in Julian's presence. She realized that love, even when lost, left a mark, an imprint that would shape her forever. In the months that followed, Emily poured her heart into her writing. She filled pages with memories, with the ache of longing and the bittersweet joy of having loved and lost. She wrote of the challenges, the misunderstandings, the moments of pure connection that transcended language. Her novel, titled Love Lost in Translation, became a quiet success, resonating with readers who knew the pain and beauty of loving across boundaries. Julian, too, found solace in words. He continued to translate poetry, each line a small act of hope, a bridge between worlds. Sometimes, he would pick up Emily's book in a quiet bookstore, run his fingers over her name, and smile, knowing that their story had not been lost, but transformed. Years passed. Emily traveled to new cities, met new people, but she never forgot Paris, or the man who had taught her the meaning of manque. She understood now that love was not always meant to last, that some stories were meant to linger as memories, shaping the people they touched. One spring, she returned to Paris. The city was as she remembered, alive with possibility, drenched in sunlight. She wandered familiar streets, visited old haunts, and finally found herself at the same cafe where it had all begun. She sat by the window, ordered a coffee, and watched as the world moved outside. There, in the gentle hum of the city, she felt the ghost of her former self, the echo of a love that had changed her. A man entered the cafe, his hair touched with grey, his eyes kind and searching. He looked at her, recognition dawning in his smile. "Emily?" Julian asked, his voice soft, uncertain. She smiled, her heart fluttering with the old, familiar ache. "Julian." They sat together, two old friends, and spoke of life, of dreams, of the years that had passed. There was no bitterness, only gratitude, a quiet acknowledgement of what they had shared. As they parted, Julian pressed a small envelope into her hand. Inside was a poem, written in 2 languages, each line a testament to the love they had known. Emily walked along the Seine, the words echoing in her mind, and realized that some things, though lost in translation, are never truly lost at all. She had come to Paris searching for inspiration, for meaning, for love. What she found was a story, one of longing, of loss, and of the enduring power of the human heart. And as she crossed the ancient bridges, the city unfolding before her like the pages of a novel, Emily finally understood. Love, in all its forms, was the greatest translation of all.